Welcome to my channel. I am DJ Ghetto Steve. Welcome back if you've been here before. We are going to do something a little bit different for 2023. We are going to talk about homeschooling, primarily homeschooling within the evangelical fundamentalist community. We've talked a lot about the Baptists and the independent Baptists and, their specific beliefs and whatnot. But now, especially after looking at that Salty video the other day, I really want to address the way that things are presented to children and what are expected of children just in the normal course of being raised by these evangelical fundamentalist parents. So before I get into the individual curriculum publishers, I do want to talk about my experience in homeschooling. My parents went into missions immediately after my father finished seminary and ordination. This meant that we were traveling to churches around the country every single weekend and many Wednesdays to speak at these churches and try to raise support to move to New Zealand and be church planners. See my video about Baptist mid-missions. That level of travel does not work with a public or private school schedule, and we would have missed so much school. So it just made sense for us to homeschool. When my parents talked to my extended family about us homeschooling, initially my extended family, especially on my dad's side, was pretty against it and thought that, really the only way to go was to put your kids in a Christian school. However, some years later, other aunts and uncles decided to start doing homeschooling as well, and it became much more favorable within the extended family. Now, I was homeschooled for everything but one semester in third grade, right after my little sister was born. We primarily used Bob Jones University curriculum with some exceptions. BJU is a whole thing with issues with racism. They actually banned interracial dating until 2000, and homophobia and transphobia, they still fine and otherwise penalize LGBTQ students, among their many, many issues. But that I'll cover another day. The BJU curriculum was decent and required a lot of parental involvement, which was how my mother preferred to have our schooling, at least until we were older and able to self-direct better. She had gone to college for early childhood education, but was unable to finish because she got pregnant with me in her senior year. I think this uniquely positioned her to do well in our early childhood education. I was a voracious reader, and they encouraged that in every way that they possibly could. I was reading at a college level by 6th grade. I also did well with homeschooling for the most part because I'm incredibly independent and self-driven. One of my first words was by self. The semester that I spent in public school was really frustrating. I felt like a lot of the work was way too easy, and I didn't get enough personal assistance with the math issues that I had. The school had a structure where you would move up through the times tables, and I got stuck on the 7s for pretty much the entire semester. But I was left to just work on rote memorization by myself. There was no response to the fact that I was struggling with that level. That's something that I didn't really deal with in homeschooling. If I had a question about a lesson or didn't understand a concept or kept missing a particular type of problem, I had a parent who would try to walk me through it one-on-one. Earlier in the year of third grade, I was really struggling with math and got my first D. I was absolutely crushed, and from then on, I had horrible test anxiety. I had always performed at the top of the spectrum in tests until then, so suddenly I realized I could and probably would fail at things in the future, and that absolutely terrified me. In high school, I once again had math issues with the beginning of algebra, but once I got into Algebra 2, things made more sense, and I aced through that, trigonometry, geometry, and AP Physics. AP Calculus was another issue. I simply did not understand. My parents either didn't understand it themselves or had issues trying to put it into a form that made sense to me. We even tried having my mom's boss tutor me a couple of times as he had a master's in mathematics. But it wasn't enough. So since I was failing that class, we dropped it early, saved my GPA in my senior year. I thought it would be okay, but I wanted to be a physical therapist. So I was in pre-med my freshman year of college and really needed that basis of calculus for chemistry. I struggled hard in college science classes. Some very kind friends tried to tutor me, so I squeaked by with a C minus in chemistry, I think, and like a C in biology. I ended up changing my major halfway through the year to history as I was excelling in my humanities classes. I had always enjoyed science the most during junior high and high school, but once in college, I found history and art far more fascinating. I was also in the honors program my freshman year of college, which included an exhausting reading schedule where we would get a weekly list of about 20 to 30 books to pick several from to read. Now, since I'm a voracious reader, that worked well for me, and I spent a ton of time hanging out in parks, reading books. I did so well in my honors classes, which included history, philosophy, and humanities. So that influenced my choice to change majors to history quite a bit. But I'm getting away from homeschooling. So the BJU curriculum is, of course, Christian based and mostly Baptist theology. My science lessons would be half science and half creationism slash Bible study to explain how God was demonstrated through that particular process in science. In grade school, the 80s and early 90s, I just had books, and my mom had a teacher's companion book slash answer key. And then in junior high school, which was the mid to late 90s, I had more video lessons than direct lessons with my mom. Looking back, most of it was decent from a curricula standpoint, but the chemistry lessons were atrocious. I never learned how to do the equations for chemical reactions. It was very basic, high level information. Now, I tested well on the ACT and SAT because the science questions that were asked in those tests were more like, what are the steps of mitosis? Or what is a catalyst? And those things I definitely knew. The concepts I had, the math, I did not. I felt like I was well prepared for college, but experiencing college was a whole new deal. The difference in the format of instruction as well as the difficulty of the curricula was very destabilizing for me. Given BJU's history of racism, it is totally unsurprising that it was present in their textbooks. They positioned abolitionism and the civil rights movement as, abolition is the white saviors, which is a good thing, but slavery wasn't really that bad to begin with. Black people did it to other black people, so it's fine. Or the civil rights movement was problematic and involved a lot of violence from people of color. Not that it was a problem that we had Jim Crow laws, it was a problem that we were trying to get rid of, the Jim Crow laws. Of course, they were against feminism, so women's rights were seen as unbiblical and unnecessary because women could vote. What more did you want? BJU subscribes to the complementarian structure, so women should be subjugated to a certain degree because they are not intended to lead anything outside the home. This was also during the period when we would listen to Rush Limbaugh while traveling, which we did, like I said, every week. So I absorbed a lot of toxic anti-feminism and anti-woke ideology from a self-absorbed opiate addict and philanderer, while he decried others for doing the exact same things. It is embarrassing how long I use the phrase assumed room temperature for anyone who died that I didn't like, and feminazi for anyone who dared suggest women should be seen as more equal to men in society. Now, especially in grade school, we had a lot of Bible study as part of our curriculum. I was also in Awanas, so scripture memorization was highly prized, and I excelled at that. I got piano lessons from my grandma for some years, and then in junior high and high school, I had a piano and voice teacher who was fantastic. She was a Lutheran pastor's wife and just the sweetest lady ever. I won a bunch of music competitions during this time and was heavily involved in community and children's theater, which was a door into learning dance. Scandalous! But Broadway and ballet were less problematic because they didn't involve a lot of sensual dance moves, so it was okay. Things changed a lot when my parents left missions. Up until I was 11, we traveled constantly, which, like I said, was a big reason why we homeschooled, and we would move to a different state every 9 months or so, and that meant I was constantly making new friends, saying goodbye to old friends that I'd maybe known 6 months, and living out of a suitcase. Most of the time I loved this because I got to see so much of the country, visit so many museums, parks, etc., and I was a very energetic and extroverted kid, so meeting new people was fun, usually. We often did classwork in the car. We'd be given chapters to read, and then we'd do tests or discussions when we stopped somewhere, and Mom could pull out the companion book. When Rush's show was finished, we'd listen to Patch the Pirate or Salty the Singing Songbook or something along those lines. Everything we did was steeped in independent Baptist theology. It made sense to me as a teenager that God would be a consistent presence in every facet of my education because of how my earlier childhood had been. So while listening to a devotional in the middle of my biology lesson was a little annoying, it was likely something that I had heard numerous times at that point and was just boring because it wasn't teaching me anything new. But it seemed like the right way to do things at the time. I was thoroughly convinced that homeschooling was far superior to public school or private school. I had tested in the 99th percentile growing up, taking the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, read well above my grade level consistently, was nerdy by comparison to my local peers, etc. My whole life, I had had people assuming I was special or stupid, and that's why I was homeschooled. I had extended family that highly criticized my parents' choice to homeschool us, so I had criticism coming from all sides and got very defensive about it at a young age. Even after I started deconstructing and confronting some of the traumatic parts of my childhood, I clung to that homeschool supremacy and got rather obnoxious online. Yeah. But who didn't do something cringe online in 2002? I mean, really. Since I hadn't really accomplished anything adult at that point, I felt like I needed to retain a certain amount of validation from scholastic accomplishments. But no one cares that you aced all your classes when you were the only student, and surely your mom graded you perfect on everything just to make herself look good. But I felt frustrated with this inflated sense of intelligence and superiority. I had things that were clearly not my forte, structures and concepts that were unintelligible to me as they had been communicated thus far. To this day, I have no idea how much of it was pedagogy and how much of it was just personal things for me that don't make sense and I just shouldn't worry about it. And how did that mesh with this superiority I had academically? There were things that my mom was phenomenal at, like English and writing, early math, field trips. I don't remember enough to really have an opinion about her early history and social studies or science teaching. She definitely taught me how to cram. When I was in third grade, we had just moved to a new area where homeschoolers were required to meet weekly with a school representative that would test me to make sure I was keeping up with the public school kids. The problem was that I did not use the same curriculum as the public school, so our stuff wasn't necessarily in the same order. Every week, my mom would get a list of topics from the syllabus and would do my normal schoolwork, plus a crash course in whatever I hadn't covered yet, and that would be on that public school test. I'm pretty sure that was a big part of why I went to the public school in the second semester. My mom had just had my little sister shortly before that school year started, so she had a newborn, a pre-K, and me in third grade. So with this double duty teaching, I guarantee you that was just more than was possible. And good for her for reaching out to the support options when trying to manage youngins postpartum. I am a proponent of mandatory educational reviews, not necessarily standardized testing, but some sort of evaluation. But what that district did was just insane. When I got into college and had to do a million research papers as an English major, I was well prepared. I was very well versed in MLA format, which was preferred at the time. I got great grades in those classes. I credit the amount of encouragement I got to pursue medical curiosities. In high school, I was obsessed with Ebola, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and Huntington's disease. Do not ask me why those specific ones. I know like one or two of them were because of a movie I saw in the 80s, but I don't know why those clicked for me so much, but I was just fascinated, and I would spend hours poring over books in the research section of the library. That was my favorite place to be. Favorite place to be. Since it was on subject matter that I really enjoyed and had questions about, it didn't feel like schoolwork. I loved the idea of spending all afternoon at the library, and writing a paper was just the best way to convey all the stuff I learned since I was excited to talk about it to others, and I'm pretty sure only my parents or maybe some kindly doctors would have been interested in that conversation. I was raised to learn things through songs, mostly religious stuff, but certainly some phonics songs and that kind of thing as well. So when I was in college and was struggling to memorize the periodic table, I set it to the tune of the college fight song and walked around campus singing to myself. Yes, I got a lot of weird looks. On the one hand, I have some great study tools that I have learned through self led education. But at the same time, the things that have allowed me to succeed in areas where I struggled involved connecting with peers, something I did not have access to before college. And I really wonder, would I have struggled as much with, say, college level calculus if I had been in a high school calculus class where I could have study sessions with peers and we could pool our knowledge? But part of me, through adult experience with data concepts, just thinks that the invisible nature of calculus does not jive with how I've always processed numerical data. Physics and geometry were a cakewalk for me because I could visualize the problem moving through the steps. So I find myself 23 years after graduation with such a mixed bag of feelings about homeschooling. In many ways, I feel that any harm was primarily due to the religious context more so than the pedagogy, but there are specific things I really wish I had had more academic resources for. I'm sure the same could be said for many academic circumstances. I'm pretty sure everyone agrees junior high and high school suck. I don't think any of us really have glowing reviews of the whole thing. I certainly had years of rage while trying to work through everything as a young adult, and I'm grateful that that's not where I am anymore. I may be critical of many common homeschooling habits, but I don't think that homeschooling should be banned. I believe that there is no replacement for skilled instruction that goes beyond read this chapter and answer the questions at the end. I don't think that necessarily every concept needs detailed instruction, but many do. I think that self-directed projects are important because you do need to learn those things before you hit the working world and or college, but they should not be the majority or entirety of a teenager's educational experience. Graduate work, sure. High school, no. I think it is important to do three things if you are struggling to deal with your homeschool experience. One, recognize that most likely the educational decisions made for you were done because your parents thought they were the best based on the information and influences they had. Two, that does not mean you have to be okay with it and you are valid in whatever feelings you have. Three, make it your responsibility to learn and do better in your own life. You cannot change your past. It is not your fault that you have educational deficits, social interaction issues, religious trauma, but it is your responsibility to learn to cope and to heal. This is not to downplay the severity of what some people have experienced, which far surpasses what my childhood was like, but to encourage folks to seek mental health and educational resources because life does not have to be that level of misery or hopelessness. I also encourage homeschool graduates to seek out community, people who really get it. Knowing you are far from alone can be so comforting. Okay, so I want to take a look at some of the resources that are available for people who are using Bob Jones University curriculum today. These obviously were not available in the 80s and early 90s, but the material really doesn't seem to have changed that much. So I think it's still a pretty good overview of what kinds of topics they talk about. So this is a history, world history. So this was done in like late grade school, maybe junior high, so somewhere between like 5th and 8th grade. And so we have some pretty typical terms that are going to be talked about. And of course, we have the creation mandate. What is the name of the command for God, or sorry, what is the name of the command for man to control the earth by exercising dominion over it? It is called the creation mandate. Whose efforts did God use to save the human race from the flood? Noah. Who committed the first murder? Cain. Now, I appreciate that, they are Christian and they want to include Bible stuff, but this is a world history thing, and it's not just Middle Eastern history. It's not just Hebrew history. Because you'll notice that that's like half the information in this little subset. It's like I said, it was like half information and half Bible study. So it is heavily religious. So you have to keep in mind that your average Christian goes to church on Sundays. They might go to Awanas. They might go to prayer meeting on Wednesdays. They might have a small group that they meet with once a week or once a month. But they're not necessarily having biblical instruction literally 7 days a week. Christian homeschoolers, 100%. Bible, every single day, all day long, in every single subject that you have. The only reprieve I really got from this was math, because we use Saxon for math, and Saxon really didn't have any religious stuff in it. However, I will never forget, I'm trying to remember which book it was. I want to say it was either physics or trigonometry, but there was a whole chapter that was literally nothing but the author of the textbook complaining about how we don't use the metric system in America, and I needed to write letters to my congressman to request that we change to the metric system. I was like, okay, I actually asked my mom, I was like, can I just skip this chapter? Like, I get the metric system is great. Personally, I think it's awesome. I do a lot of stuff in the metric system, but I function in the United States and we use the empirical system. Or, not empirical. Imperial. There we go. Use the imperial system. Now, there's basically like 3 different types of homeschooling curriculum that I'm going to be looking at least in these first few videos. We're going to have Bob Jones, Abeka, and ATI, which is the wisdom booklets that were made by Bill Gothard. So for the difference between these, the main thing that I have found, because I personally never did ACE or Abeka or ATI, so I'm relying on other homeschoolers to inform me on what happened. But it seems like Bob Jones was really a class structure. It was intended for there to be a teacher who would be giving instruction for the majority of the class time. For ATI and Abeka and ACE, it was much more about set the kid down with this workbook, they'll do a particular number of pages or sections, and they're done. There's not really a whole lot of in-person instruction for those. Now also, this I was kind of blown away by. Bob Jones actually has videos that are basically example or sample lessons that you would get as being part of the Bob Jones University online homeschool distance learning program. So you would, very much like what I had in high school. So, you watch a short video and they explain a particular period in history or a science topic or something, and then you'll have bookwork and worksheets to do after that. I remember the videos being fairly long, like 30 to 45 minutes. Apparently that has changed. They are now in much more bite-size pieces. I would love to show you some of this instruction because it is so quintessentially South Carolina. But unfortunately, they have legal things, so I don't feel like dealing with the legal folks at Bob Jones University for showing their stuff.
Both of my children kind of have the same type of learning style, and they like the same type of curriculum. And I've noticed this through the years. It's not something that I push, it's something that I kind of just let them figure out on their own. And then once they figured out what they liked, it became easier for me to pick out curriculum. I was able to really pick up early on in our homeschooling journey that both of my kids really liked traditional style curriculum. Traditional style it's pretty easy to spot. It feels a lot like regular school, like public school. A lot of kids don't take to this type of curriculum, but some kids do, and my two are definitely in that category, and I don't know why that is, but honestly, I'm just glad that I was able to figure it out, because
I would hazard a guess that most kids respond well to a actual live instruction classroom type structure versus the workbooks and self-led instruction, primarily depending on how well their parent teaches. Because I know from college, I had certain professors that I could listen to for hours. I had no problems paying attention throughout their lectures. I was able to pick out the important pieces and make, good notes. And then I had other professors, like my honors history professor, who just it was so much, and it was overwhelming, and I would have to record the lecture and listen to it 2, 3, 4 times to actually get everything. And so it was hard to be, I was excited for the history classes because I learned a lot of stuff. It was just really, really hard. And so I much preferred the teachers that had an easier to follow cadence and movement through the topic at hand. So it matters a lot of who your teacher is and how well they do it, how well they tailor it to your specific learning style, and how well they just in general teach. This is why teachers go to school for 6, 8, 10 years. Pedagogy matters. It matters so much. And this is something that gets lost on so many homeschool parents. They're like, I know my kid better than anybody else does, and so therefore I will be the best teacher. Now, I know my body the best from anybody. I've chronic conditions, and so I know my body the best. However, I still get blood work done by an actual phlebotomist. I get my x-rays and sonograms done by actual radiologists. I go to the people who know how to do these diagnostic things and these maintenance things and these, monitoring things. I know what my symptoms are, and I can tell my doctor, hey, we started doing this, and so this is how it affected my symptoms and my stability and whatnot. I'm not the doctor to say definitively, yes, we should diagnose it as X, Y, or Z, or yes, we should try following this other treatment plan. I can certainly do my research and be as much of an advocate for myself as I can be, but ultimately, I am not the doctor, and I have a somewhat myopic and limited perspective on my own issues because it's all in my own head and my own perspective and my particular slant on how I see things. I will be describing a situation to my therapist and she'll see it very, very differently because we have that different perspective on things. And so just because you know someone better than, say, any other person on the planet does not necessarily mean that you should be their doctor or their therapist or their teacher. Just saying.
This makes picking out curriculum so much easier for me now that I know what style they like, and it makes finding a successful curriculum much easier. So BJU kind of fits into that category. We're not really looking at gentle curriculum or even Charlotte Mason, which, you know, if I had my choice, I would want to pick out these beautiful Charlotte Mason type of curriculums, you know, anything that had literature-based curriculum. I really wanted my kids to take to Sunlight. It did not happen that way because I had to go with what they take to. So now that I've kind of explained this, now I can go into why this is working for us.
Now, for those who are not in the homeschooling community, Charlotte Mason is very, very popular right now. She's so hot right now. But Charlotte Mason is kind of a Montessori type perspective on education. Obviously, Montessori is, you know, a little bit younger, and then Charlotte Mason kind of takes it to the older ages. But it is very much based in like a classical curriculum where you learn about things by reading classic texts. So you learn about history by reading books written in a certain period, or you learn English by reading high English books, which, you know, has pros and cons. Like, yes, it's great to be a master of the classics, but it's also important to know how to speak in modern day English, to know how to convey things in a speech or a paper or an email to your coworker. So there's obviously going to be nuance in things, and hopefully people who want to do homeschooling right are going to take a holistic approach and not just do one particular type of schooling for everything. You're going to incorporate a lot of different tools and a lot of different resources, but that is not always the case.
So although I won't be using BJU in the coming year, I'm actually using Generations, which is kind of still in that traditional category. I did want to go over BJU while I still had it before I sell it. So the first thing you're going to get, this is the kids textbook. Now this is the updated version. I believe they are going through a period where they're updating their curriculum right now. This is the updated grade 5 history. This is American history, but they call it Heritage Studies. So their histories are heritage.
Now, quick note, this is called Heritage Studies because Christian nationalism means that us white Christians have a heritage in the United States. So we are part of that manifest destiny. We are supposed to be here, and we are God ordained to be here. And so all of the displacement of indigenous people, that's just part of our heritage. It was, you know, God meant that, but it's all it is just a call out, a dog whistle. I don't even know if it's a dog whistle. It's kind of a bigger whistle to Christian nationalism.
So this is Heritage Studies 5. So this is the textbook. So you're going to get that, of course. You're going to get an activity manual, answer key, and you're going to get an activity manual. I actually don't have the activity manual, but it's basically the workbook that goes with this that has all of the worksheets inside that are blank for your kids to do. Then you have the teacher book. I really like curriculum that comes with the teacher book. I don't know why, I don't know.
When I got older, I actually did a lot of work out of the teacher book myself. Not the answer key, but the teacher book. So that way I had additional guidance on how to interpret certain concepts in especially history and heritage studies. The teacher's companion basically tells you how to teach the material. So it tries to step in for actual education in pedagogy. It is not the same, but it does give you kind of a step-by-step way to explain the material as you're going through it.
I don't know if it's some kind of like thing inside my brain where I just feel safer if I have a teacher book, but I really like that it's coming with a teacher book. So you're also going to get test booklets. So this is the answer key, and it also comes with the blank test too. So Heritage Studies 5 really focuses on American history. The basic structure of BJU is you're going to take it chapter by chapter. So it's not the same thing every single day, but it's really the same rhythm through each chapter. So you're going to begin a new chapter. You're going to get a vocabulary list of things that you can go through with your kids to make sure that they understand it. And inside of the teacher book, you will get those vocabulary words, you will get the definition, and you can go over those. You're going to go over a basic summary of the chapter, the titles, and kind of just discuss what they think they're going to be reading about. And then you're going to get a summary for yourself and extra things to tell them about the chapter or different points in the chapter to kind of go along with it. Read a passage, and then they're going to have activity manual worksheets to do after.
Read the chapter, answer the questions at the end. That is the bread and butter of homeschool. I don't think it really matters what curriculum you use. That's basically what it boils down to. The parents might kind of walk you through the chapter and answer questions as they are able, but I know for me, if I were to try and sit down and talk to someone about the Reconstructionist period in America, I would be hard pressed to really have any details in my brain. I would have to go look those things up. So if it's not explicitly listed in that teacher book to tell you how to say it, it's going to be a crapshoot as to whether or not the kid is going to actually get those questions answered, or if they're going to get a full understanding of that particular period or concept or problem.
My kids love worksheets. Not all kids like worksheets. My youngest, I don't know what it is, he just really enjoys worksheets, so this was a really good fit for him. And the worksheets really are important for the tests because there are tests at the end of the chapter. So
now we run into a problem that is called teach to the test. So there are a couple of different ways of teaching, so different styles of pedagogy. And one of them that is unfortunately super duper common, especially since the advent of standardized testing, is teaching to the test. That is what happened when I was in 3rd grade and the public school would quiz me every week. My mom would teach to the test and make sure that I had enough understanding to be able to regurgitate the answers on the test. I didn't necessarily fully understand the concepts, but I was able to answer the questions on the test. It doesn't necessarily transfer to your long-term memory, but you remember it well enough to answer the test the next day. There are so many people who are critical of certain school districts' curriculum because of the way that they feel like it teaches to the test and the kids don't actually grasp the full concepts. So this has been a debate that has been waged in the education sector for decades. And in most cases, people will tell you that simply teaching to the test is problematic. It is not a full education. It is not really understanding that, it is not really making sure that the children understand. It is just making sure that they can regurgitate a specific set of facts about whatever chapter it is that they're studying. So this, I think, was part of why I struggled with early algebra and with calculus, because there was so much foundational concept that needed to be grasped. It wasn't a full problem that I finished. I needed to, understand the pieces of the problem and understand how to work through each of those core foundational pieces and then put it all together and it's the full problem. And I just wasn't able to get those foundational concepts to really like understand them beyond being able to answer 10 questions on a math test. So I have major issues with teaching to the test, as do a great number of educational professionals. I am not an educational professional. That was poor poor sentence structure on my part, but myself as well as professionals in the educational field, we have issues with teaching to the test. And so much homeschool relies on that. And it is unfortunate. And I think it is a major blind spot that homeschoolers do not want to talk about.
So toward the end of the chapter, they are going to do a review. So they'll have usually like a review type of day where they can go back, kind of study the chapter, read over their activity manual sheets, and then the following day they take a test. Each chapter also has within it different book suggestions, and I like that about it. It will tell you different books that would be a good fit to kind of go along with the curriculum and with what they're reading, so you can also do that. Again, it's not necessary, it's just one of those, additional enrichment activities. And then they also have visuals and additional instructional worksheets. Again, the instructional aids are not necessary to complete the curriculum, but they are helpful, okay?
I also want to talk about how this is something that I hear from a lot of homeschoolers. They'll talk about wanting to complete the curriculum. And that is a matter of making it to the end of the textbook by the end of the school year, whether that is year round or whether you follow more of a traditional school year. And I think that some public and private schools probably fall into this as well. But again, we're looking at achieving a milestone that has to do with, how many pages of a book did you read? Not how well do you understand what you read, but how much did you actually read? Now, I want to give you an example. When I was in grade school and they had those summer reading programs at the libraries, I figured out a shortcut. I would check out every single choose your own adventure book that particular library had. I would then go through and read it and intentionally make bad choices. So I would kill myself off quickly, and I technically read the book because I got to the end of a story arc within the book. And so I got to check that off as, all right, book read, book read, book read. And I didn't read the whole book. I didn't even necessarily understand the story that I was working through. I just knew that, if I was walking through a mummy's tomb, then yes, open the sarcophagus, do it. So it feels like it is measuring the wrong things.
So with that, I'll show you kind of some of these and what they look like. We didn't do all of them, we did some of them. So they'll have some that are like this, and there'll be, additional maps. And yes, everything is in color. And then some of them are like this, where they will have things where they actually fill in the blank type of things.
I really wish I could read that. And these really help
with the instruction and with the comprehension of what they read during that specific day. And they will tell you in the teacher manual which ones are going to be for the day, so you can already have them, done and ready to go. So the tests are basically made up of questions from the activity manual. So these are the ones that are actually important for the test taking. And most of the test questions will be taken directly from these sheets right here. So you want to make sure that they do those for the tests.
Teach the test, teach the test, teach the test.
Everything else is optional and kind of an enrichment type of thing, but the actual activity manual sheets, I would not skip these if at all possible. So I'm going to turn their camera around and I'm going to kind of show you guys a little bit of a look inside of some of the pieces. So here's the main three pieces. You have the textbook, the teacher's manual, and then the activity manual key. And again, like I said, you're going to have another book that looks just like this, that is the activity manual sheets for your child. And that's the consumable that you need. So just a little flip through the book so you can see what it looks like. This is the beginning of a chapter, and these are what the beginnings of the chapters look like. So you have a really nice picture, a focus of what you're going to be learning, and then a timeline at the top. So let's take a look at the teacher's manual. So at the beginning, it kind of shows you a different breakdown of all of the different pieces and how to teach this. And then you have a lesson plan overview. This isn't totally necessary. It's easier just to follow each lesson as you go along. Here is a lesson breakdown of lesson 1, and then you're going to have the Teach for Understanding and then the activity manual sheets and what they're supposed to read. So this kind of breaks it down at the very beginning of each lesson. So each day is a lesson. So this would be lesson 1. So this is the very first lesson that you would do with your child, and it kind of explains everything and what you need to do. And then it'll show you in these little notes here if something is on the CD, and it'll
This was something that I found in someone's flashcards that they had put on a study website. But apparently, according to the most current Bob Jones University Heritage Studies, otherwise known as American History, there are roughly a half dozen different indigenous areas populated by a set indigenous group. So out of the literally hundreds of indigenous tribes that have existed in North America, they're going to pigeonhole them into 6 main categories and 6 main tribes. I had a history professor later in college after I left the Christian school, and he was obsessed with making sure that we understood the indigenous history of America. And every single chapter of our American history book, you know, we would have the parts of the book that we would read because that's what would be on the test. But then his lectures would be nothing but explaining how what was going on in white society at that time was impacting indigenous cultures and how those things, you know, affected each other back and forth, because that was something that was missing from mine and many other American kids' education when they were in elementary school, junior high, high school. Everything about our indigenous cultures is so limited when we actually talk about it in school. And we are passing a bar of at least admitting that there were indigenous people here and that we kind of messed up their stuff. We caused problems for them. But it is similar to the way that this would handle race relations during the civil rights movement or during slavery and abolitionism. They're not going to have a truly holistic view of the situation. They're going to be looking at it explicitly from a white nationalist colonizer mindset. So it's got a lot of toxic stuff in there that I do not recommend, but obviously your mileage may vary.
It'll tell you where to find it. Here's an overview of chapter 6, and it's kind of the same thing. You're going to have an introduction, what the chapter is going to be focusing on, and then down here you're going to have a table of all of the different things to look at. So you have vocabulary words, you have content, so you kind of have like a little timeline, and then they're going to show you what activity manual sheets are going to be used and the text that they're going to be reading, and then this is going to go from lesson 46 to 54. And then over here, this is kind of just an enrichment activity. So here is a book that they have that will go with this activity if you want to get a book ahead of time to read. And then you have introduction questions and answers. So they have questions for you to ask your child, and then they have the answer for you. And then something else that's kind of neat, they will have these questions and answers of review questions of what they read the day before and what they read that current day. So you will have different questions and answers to go over with your child.
I can't read all of this, it's kind of blurry, but I do see where it says they demanded states' rights. So being that this is on the slavery page, and then also you'll notice they have the Bible and slavery right here. So they do at least admit that those who were using the Bible to defend slavery were incorrect, but only by a technicality. Not that slavery as a whole is wrong, but selling stolen people is a problem. I mean, yes, selling stolen people is a problem, but it's a lot bigger than that, and it was not just about states' rights.
And some of them are critical thinking, and some of them are just easy ones pulled from the text. So this is a great way to kind of gauge how your kids are comprehending what they're reading.
So yeah, that's what Bob Jones University homeschool curriculum looks like. It has not changed very much at all. I don't know whether that is to say no one has moved forward very much in America when it comes to educating on history, specifically American history. It's kind of depressing that we've still got top-notch curriculum calling it states' rights. Yeah. So again, my main critiques here are children are expected to self-teach far too much. There is a good in some self-directed learning, but you should not just be reading the chapter and answering the keys at the end. You should also not have extraneous religion in your education. I think that it is all perfectly fine to have a Bible class along with all of your other classes, but I think it is overly indoctrinating to have every single class have a form of Bible study in it all day long, every single year, kindergarten through senior year. I think that it is also necessary to utilize all of your resources, and that means having peers, not just your brother or sister who is however many years older or younger than you. You need peers on your level that you can discuss with, especially when you're in like junior high and high school. I think that that is absolutely critical. College would not have worked for me whatsoever if it hadn't been for study groups. And that was a skill that I had to learn on the fly because I had never had a study group before. Never. Even when I was taking community college classes my senior year, I did not study with the other people that I was in class with. I did all my stuff at home, came in, gave my speech, or, submitted my paper and went home. Study skills, including peers, is very important, because not only does it open up additional resources and ways to learn, but it's going to be key as an adult. No matter what job you get, you're gonna have to do group projects. No matter what job you get, you're gonna have to go through a training. You're going to need to know how to get through those things successfully, both for your own learning style, but also by taking advantage of all of the different resources you have, which includes your peers. And finally, I think the most important thing is that parents really need to be, if you're going to homeschool, do something to ensure that your children are actually learning and understanding the concepts, and you're not just teaching to a test. This may involve tutors or third-party educational evaluators, something. But you need to do something that ensures that your kid isn't just regurgitating information that they have in short-term memory and then is never going to actually remember those core concepts that were supposed to have been learned through that lesson plan. But instead, they just learned that it was the Alamo. They didn't learn about the philosophies that caused problems during the Alamo. They didn't necessarily comprehend the military strategies or the lessons that should have been learned by the person who lost in whatever scenario. Make sure you're not just teaching to the test. That is a recipe for disaster, whether you are homeschool, public school, or private school. So I do want to thank you for coming along for something a little bit different today. I am really looking forward to digging into some of the resources that I have been gifted for the ATI, IBLP, homeschooling, and just the IBLP seminars. So I'm really excited to get into that. Hopefully I will be able to do that soon. It's a lot of information, and I really want to do it justice. So since I don't have explicit experience with it, I really want to make sure that I'm understanding and I'm not just teaching to my own test. But of course, like and subscribe if you want to see more of this stuff, and I will see you next time.